8 minutes after 9 at 1040 WHO Radio. Mickelson here with you. As this hour, we're going to talk with an expert on televangelists. The Jimmy Bakker case is just coming to a close right now in Charlotte, North Carolina. And from the Grandview College, the professor of radio and TV news over there is Stephen Winzenburg. Steve, welcome to our program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
You are a recent newcomer here to Iowa.
Just moved here this summer.
And you have really made a reputation for yourself countrywide on the subject of televangelism.
I started studying all the TV preachers about 10 years ago. Actually, when I went to University of Minnesota for my master's work in 1980.
Why for?
Why for what?
Why for did you do that?
Well, I wanted to, first of all, I wanted to get a master's degree, and second, I wanted to do something different that no one else had done.
Back then, it was a novelty.
Well, it still is. I'm still one of only 4 or 5 people in the United States who studies TV preachers.
Willing to subject yourself.
That's right. And I'm the only person who studies their shows.
Okay.
The other guys tend to be sociologists. They study the audiences and some of the preachers' manipulativeness.
Okay.
But I study the programs themselves to find out what the guys do on the air. And so when I wrote my master's thesis in 1980, I did it on Jim Bakker and Pat Robertson, and those were 2 people who most of the public had never heard.
Back
before.
then.
Yeah.
That was before Reagan, before...
That was
just right at the beginning.
It was right before Reagan.
Right before the new right before Falwell.
That's right.
You've been watching this for a long time. You're not an also-ran here.
So in 87, when the PTL scandal broke, mine was the only published research done on Jim Bakker, period. And so I got all the calls, and since then it's just been lots and lots of interviews and talking about
Do you
Bakker.
regret it that you got into this? I mean, you could have been doing something productive here.
Well, it's kind of my little niche. It's one of those things. Sure, my other alternative, other than this, what I wanted to study really was 60 Minutes, the 60 Minutes crew, and do a research project on the 60 Minutes crew. And instead, I got these TV preachers. And, I look back and think, well, 60 Minutes would have been more noble, but on the other hand, this is unique. So.
Well, so you came to Des Moines, Iowa, here to head the journalism or head the TV
Oh, no, I'm
radio?
not the head. You better not tell my boss.
I'm sorry about that. You're part of the radio TV news.
Right.
You teach budding journalists
broadcasting,
how they, too, can study these kinds of things and totally waste their lives.
Well, and it's been really a good experience for me because I was in broadcasting for about 13 years.
Yeah, you managed several radio stations, didn't you?
Before I got into teaching, and I've been teaching for 7 years. But once the PTL scandal broke, I saw a whole different side of broadcasting, and that was sitting on this side of the microphone now. Not on your side, but on this side. And suddenly I saw my words distorted. I saw my quotes in print that were taken out of context.
Kind of irritating, isn't it?
Oh, it was frustrating. So frustrating. USA Today called me one day, and they wanted to know what my comments were on Jerry Falwell stepping down from PTL, because he headed PTL for a while. When they stepped down, they wanted to know my comments. And I said, well, I was really shocked and surprised because I kind of hoped he was going to stay on for a year or 2. The next day, the headline on page 4, it was, of USA Today, was PTL expert not surprised Falwell steps down. And I don't know where they got that from. I mean, it said just the opposite of what I said, and they quoted me and everything. But somehow they turned my words around to make it sound like I wasn't surprised at all.
So what did that teach you about this business?
Taught me, first of all, this is some advice to your listeners, don't believe everything you read.
And only part of what you hear.
Yeah. Well, I believe much more in radio than I do in newspapers now, so...
at least the immediacy of it.
At least in this situation, I can tell you what I think, and you're not going to cut my words apart too much. In newspapers, they will pick and choose what they want to put down, and so I'm very skeptical of seeing things in print.
What does it do to shake your history, your sense of history, too? I mean, just think of how many ways that... See, this happens to me all the time on the air. I don't want to be too inside about this, but I get letters from people who just yell and scream at me for saying things I never say.
Right, that's right.
I get quoted as saying things I never said.
That's right.
People tend to hear what they want to hear. And then they filter back through their own mental processes what is heard, and then they translate it in their words.
That's right.
And then their words become your words, and that's what gets quoted.
Well, when the Des Moines Register article came out about me last week, I immediately got a very scathing letter from a woman in some rural Iowa town just ripping me apart on my beliefs. She has no idea what I believe. She really doesn't.
She assumes that because you're a critic...
Well, she assumes that everything in the newspaper article represents my total body of belief. It's totally incorrect. That's a very small part of what I said.
Okay, yeah, so this is just, maybe it's a lesson that all of us need to think about from time to time. Just because it's quoted doesn't mean it's...
And I think I can relate this to my research, too, my TV preacher research. Very often you hear the stereotypes that all TV preachers are money hungry, and the only people who watch TV preachers are little old ladies on pensions.
That isn't true, is it?
It's just not true. First of all, there are 55 syndicated TV preachers. Of those, I'd say 6 or 8 are the kind that you better not trust at all.
Are they all the best known? Or are they
most of them tend to be the best known. That's the problem.
The most successful are therefore the best known.
That's right.
Are the least trustworthy?
Well, but the reason they get to be the best known is because they have to do those kind of things in order to become better known. See what I mean?
Okay.
They have to become more manipulative.
So if they're doing good, generic, decent work, nobody's ever going to hear of them.
But again, that's not true across the board, and I don't like it when people just lump all TV preachers together. For instance, Billy Graham. I've checked his organization up and down. I've spent a couple hours with the president of the Billy Graham organization in Minneapolis, and I can just tell you that that guy can be totally trusted. Now, you may not agree with what he says, but in terms of trust him completely, because he is separate from his organization. He does not give himself bonuses like a Jim Bakker or Jimmy Swaggart can do. He does not have a bunch of family members on the board of directors like a Swaggart or a Falwell. So you can trust somebody like Billy Graham. But in the case of people like Bakker and Swaggart and Robertson and Roberts, in general, the bigger they are, the less trustworthy they are. But again, please don't lump them all together.
Okay, we're here in the studio with Professor Stephen Winzenburg. He's Professor of Radio and TV News at Grandview College here in Des Moines. We're going to talk about the current crop of TV evangelists. If you have an opinion, you're welcome to raise it, or a question, you're welcome to raise it. I suspect there's fairly little that you could ask this fellow about any of these guys that he wouldn't know, because this has been his avocation here for the past several years. He's got nationally known as an expert in these subjects. If you'd like to join the conversation, you can, 284-1040 or 1-800-342-4489. We'll talk about Jim Bakker as well in just a moment. 19 after 9 at 1040 WHO Radio. Mickelson here with Professor Stephen Winzenburg. He is Grandview College's Professor of Radio TV News. He's an expert on the televangelists. The one is in the news right now, in fact, embroiled in an ongoing court case, almost like a soap opera. Headlines today, Bakker's got $3.1 million in PTL bonuses. Tell me about this Bakker guy. Is he going to go to jail, you think?
I hope so.
That seems pretty cold.
Well,
why do you hope so?
Okay, listen now. I started studying him in 1980. Okay, this has been about 10 years now.
Okay, all right.
Back then, I had copies of his financial reports, and he would get up on the air and just plain lie to people. He would say, folks, we need this amount of money for this. Or if you send in $1 million in the next 3 days, we'll be debt-free. He was lying to people. He was never going to be debt-free. But he'd get up and do that just to kind of to push them on, you know, to get them to send in money. And I caught him very often in lies. Of course, back then it didn't make any difference, because who cared? He was a nobody. In 87, suddenly it started to make a difference because the government started to move in. He deserves to go to jail. My problem with him going to prison is what happens when he gets there and suddenly a new cult following develops. People start to say, he's being unfairly treated by the government. The government is persecuting religion.
Yeah, this is a satanic attack on,
that's right,
on the man of God.
So it could be self-defeating to put him in prison, but he deserves to be there. He needs to pay for what he's done, the bad things that he's done.
Well, he can't pay if he's in jail.
Well, but he needs to pay in terms of, he hasn't shown any remorse yet, and I guess they're going to force him, if they throw him in jail, to show some type of remorse.
You think he's a hustler? That's it?
He's a person who started out with good intentions and just got sidetracked, you know, just like some of the other ones.
Is this inevitable, do you think, or is this just a reflection of the character of these individuals, or their theology, or what's going on?
Well, part of it does have to do with their theology. For instance, Bakker's Assemblies of God background, he very much believes that if you are in God's will, God will bestow material blessings upon you. And therefore, a multi-million-dollar home is simply a sign that God is blessing you. That's why it's...
But not if you steal it.
But he doesn't see it as stealing. He sees people sending in money as God sending in money. See, God's giving him the money to buy those homes, and that's a sign that Bakker's doing okay, that God is blessing him. And I have a real problem with that. You know, I don't think he should be asking for money.
But if you lie and people send you money,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
how can somebody rationalize that
Right.
as being God sending you money if
I
you're
agree.
basically extracting that money through fraud?
Well, and a lot of the testimony in the trial has been that he has lied repeatedly regarding where the money is going to go and what they need the money
Does
for.
he know that he's lying, or do you
Well,
think...
now, he claims that, well, he didn't intentionally lie. So that means one of two things. Either he is the most devious of all TV preachers, or he's the stupidest of all TV preachers. And one way or the other, the guy shouldn't be on the air.
Okay, well, if you follow the sex scandal part of this with Jessica Hahn,
Yeah, but that's such a small part of this, really.
why? That's when it all began to crumble.
Well,
Or do you think he would have crumbled without that?
really what caused it to crumble was that there was hush money paid. It wasn't so much that he had a one-time fling with her, but that she demanded hush money, that the PTL organization took money that people sent in
Yeah.
and gave it to Jessica
But do you think
Hahn.
that the organization would have remained intact if he said, hey, listen, I'm not going to pay you for that?
I think it would have remained intact if he would have gotten up the first time it became public and said, I sinned, I blew it, I'm sorry, but I'm going to stay on the air. That's what Jimmy Swaggart did, and he's still on the air today.
Is he, how's Jimmy doing?
His audience has been cut in about half, but he's still got a real strong following. He's still the number 3 rated TV preacher.
Behind?
Behind Robert Schuller, who's number 1. And then there's a Sunday show called The World Tomorrow. Have you ever heard of that?
Garner, Ted Armstrong.
Well, that's who used to do it. And
it used to be Herbert W. And
Yeah,
then he
Herbert
died.
W.,
Garner
right.
Ted. And then now who's doing it?
It's run by the Worldwide Church of God. They have a variety of different hosts on the program. It's not one special host, but that's the number 2 religious broadcast.
Is that right?
Mhm. And then
Wow.
Swaggart's number 3.
Is it? Okay, Swaggart's still hanging in there. You think he's going to do okay?
And he's still got quite a bit of support. You know, he broke with the Assemblies of God Church, and a lot of people went with him. He's very charismatic. He's a tough man to turn off. He's fun to watch. And I think he did the right thing by just admitting that he sinned, and he just moved right on. He learned from Bakker's mistakes. See, Bakker's the one who did it wrong. Bakker went and hid for 3 months. Well, that was the end of Jim Bakker. Whereas Swaggart just said, I'm sorry, I sinned. Everybody's seen him crying those tears,
Yeah.
and he moved on.
What prompted Bakker to go on Nightline, especially the second time? First time he sort of cajoled and finessed
Right.
Koppel. The second time, Koppel was laying for him.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because the first Nightline I thought was very disappointing from Ted Koppel's standpoint. I thought he did a very poor job of it. Bakker tended to win that. And I even wrote Koppel and just said, you know, you wimped out
that
on
was
the first one.
You fluffed out in the film.
Yeah, and then the second one, Koppel just came on just the opposite, just knocking him down. I'd say that the reason why Bakker went on was because generally, in the Christian community, Nightline is considered the most fair secular news program.
Yeah.
It's going to give you the fairest shake, and I'd say Larry King is number 2. Those two are considered the most fair. Namely, you can say your opinion, and they're going to go ahead and let you say it. Even though they might come back with something, they'll still let you give your side. Whereas on many secular news broadcasts, they feel like they're just being cut down. They don't feel like Ted Koppel cuts people down. Bakker and many others in the religious circles would like to be on Nightline, and I think that's why he held out to make sure that Nightline was his first appearance. But if you want my opinion, I think he really wanted to be on Johnny Carson first.
You really think so?
Because Bakker, and this is serious, you know, Bakker loves Johnny Carson. And when Bakker went into the ministry in the early 60s, he said he wanted to be the Christian Johnny Carson. Jim and Tammy Faye would go out on the road. They'd go church to church and do little revival services, and at night they'd come back to their hotel room, turn on Johnny Carson, and Jim would say to Tammy, I'm going to be the Christian Johnny Carson. And you could see that the PTL Club was patterned after the Tonight Show.
The desk, the cronies.
The sidekick, a slightly overweight sidekick who chuckled at everything Jim said.
And
that
man.
Everything. And Jim wants so badly to be on the Tonight Show, but Johnny Carson doesn't want him on. When Jim and Tammy retreated to Malibu in '87 after the scandal broke, they went out and rented a home in Malibu for a while.
Right.
They walked down the beach to Johnny Carson's Malibu home. Tammy found a piece of paper and took her lipstick and scrawled a note to Johnny Carson saying that they wanted to be on the show. And
You're making that up.
I am not making it up. And she put it in his gate, you know, right there in his gate, hoping that they could get on the Tonight Show. And of course, he never called them, and all he's done is ridiculed them ever since. I watched it the other night, and he's still ridiculing Tammy Faye. So they've made it on the Tonight Show. It's just not exactly the way they expected.
Huh. This is Stephen Winzenburg, professor of radio and TV news at Grandview College. Shall we talk to some folks
Sure.
here? And let's go right to our telephone lines. It's 26 minutes after 9 o'clock on 1040 WHO. Here's where you find us, 284-1040. You're making that up about
I
the
am not. I wouldn't make that up.
1-800...
I'll have Tammy call you and tell it to you, okay?
Okay, have her write me a note.
In lipstick.
Mary Kay lipstick. 1-800-342-4049. Good morning, Steve.
Hello.
There we go.
Yeah. I want to ask the guest if, and he sort of answered the question. I've been talking or chatting about these televangelists for a number of years with my friends, and there seem to be two views that come out. One view is that these people, and I'm talking about the 7 or 8 fellows at the top that you said that are really deceptive, and I think in the paper you mentioned Pat Robertson, Bakker, and Swaggart.
Right.
Do you believe that they are sincerely deluded? That is, when Jimmy Bakker or Pat Robertson claims to have a voice from God, and Swaggart claims that too, that they really believe that they hear a voice from God, and therefore they're sincerely deluded people and mentally unbalanced, actually? Or secondly, do you believe that they are men who chose an occupation much as an unscrupulous used car salesman selects a type of occupation, and they're really not mentally unbalanced at all? They're more or less clever or not clever at conning people.
Yeah.
Which would mean, if I could conclude, that they're really mentally balanced but morally bankrupt. In other words, they're not insane, but they're just not very good con men.
Right. And that's a good question. First of all, addressing the con men question, I don't believe that any of these guys got into this business intentionally trying to be con men, trying to make it rich. Because if you want to get into a business to make it rich, you better not get in the TV religion business. Because in most cases, you're poor, you're barely able to live, and most ministers out there could tell you that when you're in the ministry, it's just tough making it. The problem is the top ones do tend to make a lot of money, but it's only the top 7 or 8 guys. Beyond that, you don't have many of the rest of the 40 or 45 who make much money at all. So I can't say that I think that they intentionally got into the business to try to con people. I think what happened was they went in sincerely, but then eventually got sincerely removed from the reality of the situation. Namely, they started getting caught up with their own power. They saw how many people they could control. They saw that they could raise large amounts of money, and all of a sudden they became filled with themselves instead of filled with God or filled with the Spirit.
No.
I don't think they're crazy, though, and I really object to using the term crazy.
Well, they say that they hear... Now,
Yeah.
Pat Robertson said he
Yes.
hears an audible voice from God speaking to him. Now, either he does or he doesn't.
Well, but see, if I say, well, I don't think Pat Robertson hears an audible voice, who am I to say that?
Well, I don't know.
I'm not in his mind. All I can say to
if
you...
he hears an audible voice and it isn't an audible voice, then the man's insane. If he says he hears an audible voice but he doesn't hear an audible voice, then he's dishonest.
What I can tell you is this, that they sincerely believe that they hear these voices, and they sincerely believe that God gives them direction through voices, through people, through counsel of others, through a variety of means. Now, even though they may be off the track, for instance, Oral Roberts seeing his 900-foot Jesus, in 1980.
Or God's going to take me home if we don't raise a blank amount of bucks.
I really have a problem with that. Oral seems just a little bit off.
But you say he's the least harmful of that.
Well,
he tends to be the least
my
harmful.
feeling is
you think he's the most sincere, I think is what you said.
Oral Roberts?
Yeah.
I think
he really believes. I think the newspaper
really
said
believes.
He really believes what he thinks he says. Okay.
He really believes it, but I don't think he's sincere. I'm just saying he really believes it.
Oh, okay.
He really believes that he saw a 900-foot Jesus.
Okay.
And nobody can tell him different. He really believes that God was going to call him home if he didn't raise that $8 million.
But doesn't that make him mentally unbalanced?
But wait a second, though, Steve. No. I mean, what if somebody, several hundred years ago, God told him to go out and build an ark?
Right. I mean,
does God speak in an audible voice?
Well, I guess there are two considerations. Does God speak in an audible voice? But number two, how does our culture view those who claim God spoke to them in an audible voice? When I was a young kid growing up on the south side of Des Moines, there was a fellow who wrote the latest prophecy of God on his house, and they took him to Clarinda for therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And after 6 months, he was declared, or a year, he was declared healed.
Okay.
Okay. But today, Pat Robertson or Jimmy Swaggart can go on television and claim the very same thing and make millions of dollars. And I thought it was kind of interesting. In the trial, Bakker had an episode of apocalyptic vision while weeping under his couch.
Right.
I've heard him report on his show things that were similar.
Right.
As a fundraising technique. He just did it in front of the wrong audience, and they sent him for psychiatric evaluation. Correct? I mean,
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
It seems to me that what's happened is that we've had, since particularly the mid-'60s, sort of a vial of gullibility poured out on the American mind.
But on the other hand, I don't want you to say that everyone who hears God's voice or who sees a vision is totally wacko, because that's not necessarily true.
Well, I guess I was asking for your estimation, and I'm still not. I guess what I would.
He's hedging his bets.
Pardon?
I'm telling you, I'm not qualified to decide whether these guys are crazy or not. All I can tell you is whether I believe what they say, and I'm just telling you, I don't believe that Oral Roberts saw a 900-foot Jesus, but that doesn't mean he's crazy. I mean, I'm not qualified to certify him as crazy. Because
if God really spoke to Oral Roberts, if he really spoke to him in an audible voice, and the analogy was made to Noah, wouldn't God say to Oral, number one, you didn't see a 900-foot Jesus, and number two, stop lying? In like manner, God would have spoken to Jimmy Bakker if he really spoke to him and said, repent.
But look at what God does, and I'm putting words in God's mouth, I guess. Oral Roberts has had many tragedies in his life. He lost his daughter in a plane crash. He just a year or two ago lost the grandson that was named after him 4 or 5 days after the grandson was born. I mean, he's had tragedies.
Well, you're getting into the idea that, it's the retributive justice of God.
Right. I mean,
poured out on this poor fella for
see, you're asking me, has God not done something? And I'm saying maybe God has done something.
Yeah, they're unraveling.
To show Oral that he should shut up.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And I'm kind of dominating here. What are your personal religious views then? I mean, do you think there's something credible about Christianity in general? And
Sure. I believe very much in Christianity, and I wouldn't probably have gotten interested in this if I didn't have a strong Christian
You worked
background.
for an Assemblies of God radio station in Florida.
I have a really odd background. First of all, I was raised Catholic. Then in college, I switched to kind of an evangelical church, kind of a Southern Baptist church, and worked at an Assemblies of God station. Now,
so you're thoroughly confused.
But then, well, I'm not going to... I'm well-rounded.
I see. Okay.
But now, but I'm saying to you this. I've seen it from a mainline church. I've seen it from a fundamentalist evangelical and a charismatic evangelical standpoint. I can relate to these guys. I understand what they're saying. That's why I say I believe that many of them feel that they are sincere. Okay. The problem is they just get sidetracked.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Jen.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
Excellent questions. 25 before 10 on 1040 WHO Radio. If you'd like to participate, you can. Stephen Winzenburg is... that's not pronouncing it correctly. Winzenburg. Is professor of radio and TV news at Grandview College here in Des Moines now. He's an acknowledged expert on the subject of TV televangelists. And if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, you can at 284-1040 or 1-800-342-4489 as Mickelson in the Morning continues after Lee Klein updates us on the farm and markets. 17 before 10 on 1040 WHO Radio. Right now, Professor Stephen Winzenburg is here in the studio with us, professor of radio and TV news at Grandview College here in Des Moines, knowledge expert on TV evangelists. If you'd like to chat, join us right now, 284-1040, right back to our phone lines here. And I believe this is Dick. Good morning, Dick.
Hi, Jan. How you doing?
Great.
Professor?
Yes, sir.
I heard you say that you thought that the top 7 or 8 should be eliminated on these TV preachers. I've never sent any money to any of them.
I don't think he said that, though.
I didn't exactly say that. All I said is that those tend to be the ones you can't trust, but not always.
Okay, well, number one, what should you do with them? And then number two, if they were gone, don't you feel 7 or 8 others would rise to the top? I mean, isn't it a market-driven program?
Not necessarily, because what we've seen in the last 2 years since the PTL scandal broke is that the audience has started to shift away from the questionable preachers like Swaggart and Oral Roberts to more traditional type preachers. There's a guy named D. James Kennedy. He's from Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He is now the 5th-rated TV preacher. He's higher rated than Jerry Falwell or Pat Robertson or PTL Club, but most people haven't heard of him. And yet people are shifting toward that type of ministry because all he does from his Presbyterian church is get up and give a typical Sunday sermon type program. Also, the Catholic programs have gone up unbelievably in the ratings. The Sunday Mass has doubled and tripled in some cities as far as the ratings go. Also, a Lutheran program, This Is the Life, that's gone up in the ratings. People are shifting away from these questionable preachers to more traditional programs. Now the question is, will they shift back at some point, once all this hesitation goes away? Because, now it's in the news, but what about a couple of years from now? Yeah, the caller's probably right that if the top ones now fall, somebody else will probably come up through the ranks. There will always be an audience for that type of person, but I don't think that the top ones always have to be money hungry and always have to be immoral. I think there are some good ones coming up in the ranks. As I said, there are 55 programs there. There are some awfully good ones, and I just hope and pray that they don't get taken by the money and the scandal.
Well, Professor, the reason I guess I asked that question is I feel the same way that you do about the resurgence of a lot of mainstream Christian churches and programs. And I think Jimmy Swaggart's my favorite, okay? I never sent him any money because I always felt he was a little shady.
Why is he your favorite then?
He could really, pardon?
Why is he your favorite then?
Because he can sing.
Because he can really preach.
Oh, okay.
And I think I think it's not the message, but the way the message is delivered that's been responsible.
Well, he's entertaining.
A lot of people going back to church.
All right.
Like we have a church here in Des Moines, I won't mention the name, that is just growing through the walls, and it's because I think that the preacher, the minister preaches in an evangelistic or even a TV preacher type mode, and it's not a dry sermon where a minister stands up before you and reads disjointed scriptures that you really have to be a theologian to make any sense out of.
Interesting point. A lot of
put it in a context that everyone can enjoy.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because I really agree with the point that's being made. Local churches are being forced to become more entertaining and more TV-oriented. You're seeing that here in Des Moines. If the church does not start to have a big choir or soloists who sound like they just came off a TV show,
fully with background music,
then people aren't going to want to come. And what happens is more people are being attracted to these large churches that are like TV production,
like they see on the tube.
And the Register had an article last month. Bill Simber wrote a real good series of articles on the fact that the traditional churches tend to be losing people.
They're not putting on a good show.
Right. That's it, because they're not entertainment-oriented. These shows, Jimmy Swaggart, Pat Robertson, they're entertainment shows that minister. These are not ministries. These are entertainment shows that minister.
Okay.
The reason why this caller likes Jimmy Swaggart is because he's entertaining.
Yeah.
Because he likes to watch him.
Doesn't trust him, but he likes to watch him. Interesting. Thank you very much.
I think the same thing can be drawn with the TV news people. I mean, the more entertaining they are, the larger crowd that they draw.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
We're all in the same boat.
And they know that's why they call them news shows.
Right.
Thank you very much.
And I teach TV news, and one of the statistics I tell people is that the most, where do most people get their news? The answer is TV. The majority of people in the United States say they get their news from TV. But which medium do they trust the least? They always answer TV. Well, why in the world are they watching it if they trust it the least? It makes no sense. And it's what this guy is saying. He loves to watch Jimmy Swaggart, but he doesn't trust him enough to send in money. Well, people just have this fascination with entertainment.
He's bored by his own preacher, perhaps, but he trusts him, maybe.
Well, and I think people also have a hunger for this type of program. I think religious programs do a lot of good. They do supply something that's not seen elsewhere on television.
But maybe some balance to the regular...
Well, they supply a moral perspective. Where else on TV do you see a moral perspective? You don't. They supply some spiritual food, which you just don't get elsewhere on TV. The only other place would be cable.
Yeah.
And I think they do some good.
What explains Tammy Faye? I mean, if you've studied her for a while, I suspect, too.
Well, Tammy had a real rough childhood. That's probably where you need to start.
Yeah.
She came from a
I feel
home.
sorry for her in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I really think she's been victimized.
I don't like it when people laugh at her, even though she is such a cartoon character.
Jim has really, I think, taken advantage of her. Jim has used her, and I feel sorry for her, too. But on the other hand, she knows what's going on. I mean, she's not totally stupid. She knows that she's being used, and she goes along with it. Jim used her for many years in his fundraising efforts on the show because he knew that as soon as Tammy started to cry those tears, in came the dollars. It was just guaranteed. And Tammy can't make it through a show without crying.
When she starts to sing, I start to cry. Not because I moved. Oh, my goodness, what a voice.
But one thing I would say is that Jim, I think, is actually the weaker of the two. And this is kind of an odd thing to say, I guess. Jim is the kind who doesn't like to be criticized, only wants to be surrounded by people who praise him all the time. Whereas Tammy, if she's criticized, will stand up and fight for herself. You know, she really has some guts to her. But Tammy, I think, is really a lot stronger. And I'm, in a way, happy that she is not on trial because I don't really think she had anything to do with this whole mess. She was just being used by Jim. But if you want to get to where did Tammy's problems start, it was back in International Falls, Minnesota, where her parents were divorced, and that's where it started.
Doesn't anybody talk to her about the makeup? I mean, doesn't she catch on?
She doesn't really care, I don't think. That's what makes her unique.
She's universal joke.
When she was little, they went to one of the Pentecostal churches there in International Falls, and they were not allowed to wear any kind of makeup. But her mother started to do some things that were different than the rest of the people in the Pentecostal church, and Tammy has kind of taken her mother's lead and started to do things that are different. She doesn't really care what people say. And the funny thing is, I think she looks so much better if she didn't wear it. But she is just stubborn about
She's convinced that.
Yeah, she's convinced that that's what's going to...
That's her best image.
That's what makes her look good, and she's going to do it no matter what people say.
Amazing. Talk to us, folks, if you'd like to join the conversation. We're going to take a short time out right back to our phone lines at 284-1040 or 1-800-342-4040. Now, here's a question for you, especially for some of you who contributed in the past. You're going to contribute again? What do you think about all this? Does Jim Bakker deserve to go to jail? Do you think that would be justice? Do you think he belongs there? What should, if Professor Winzenburg's position is correct, that most of these guys who are on the top now are there because they have been less than forthright, less than honest, what does that say about the rest of us? Has the day of the televangelist gone? What about how you relate to this? Has it affected the way you believe? I'd like to hear some of your responses at 284-1040 in just a moment. 6 before 10 on 1040 WHO Radio. My guest here in the studio at Mickelson in the Morning is Stephen Winzenburg. Right to our phone lines with David. Good morning.
Good morning.
What do you think?
Good morning to you, Stephen.
Good morning.
I have a question. I know with Marilyn Hickey Ministries, she's probably one of a very few that I know of that is a woman in TV and radio ministry.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Pardon me?
I'm not familiar with that one.
She's based out of Denver, and she has, usually her programs are run on cable. I don't think anybody runs them locally, but if you watch cable in the morning, like about 6 o'clock in the morning, she's on CBN and a couple of the cable channels.
Can you give me your opinion of her ministry? Is it up and coming? Is it a good process?
I wouldn't say it's up and coming. She certainly has leveled off. You did make a good point in that she is one of the few females in the televangelism, but I don't perceive that she's going to go any farther than she is right now.
Really explode into the...
But I think part of that's because she's a woman, and people tend to want to watch men, and that's just the way it is when it comes to TV religion. The other part I'd say is also her theology. She has kind of a funny, charismatic mixture of theology. She's kind of a name it and claim it type person, but not exactly. She's not as far off as some of the name it and claim it types, and by that I mean, for instance, Kenneth Copeland will get on the air and say, if you want an airplane, just tell God and claim it. That's name it and claim it. Name what kind of airplane you want.
The VA has a similar philosophy.
And Maryland is kind of that way. It's that more of a liberal charismatic mixture, and that's why I just don't think she's going to attract any more viewers. Plus, physically, she looks kind of unusual on television.
Yes.
And I'm not being mean. I'm just saying that from a television standpoint, you tend to have to look kind of almost perfect.
Sure.
And
kind of like Tammy Faye.
well, Tammy Faye tries. Tammy Faye, I tell you, I enjoyed watching Tammy Faye just out of curiosity to see what she'd look like every day, or what her hair was going to be. But it's that same kind of curiosity that you go to the circus, right?
Sure, yeah. Well, I a little bit like you, probably not near as in depth, but I usually try to listen and watch to most of those programs just to see how far the theological and Christian community has come so far, and.
This is the weirdest part of this. When most people understood, I think most people understood that these guys were slipping a cog. The organized religion, mainstream religion, the church organizations weren't doing a very good job of policing themselves and letting their people know, hey, we better watch out for it. And if they did, they tried, well, that's just sour grapes.
One of the problems, and this is historically, if you want to study TV preachers historically, the reason why you have TV evangelists on today is because of the mainline religions. Years ago, in the early 1950s, the TV networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, all gave free time on Sunday morning to the mainline churches.
Because it was at that time.
Right,
yeah.
the Catholics, the mainline Protestants, and the Jewish people were allowed to rotate time. Each one got a week.
Bishop Sheen was the first well-known guy.
Right. But TV evangelists, from the standpoint of evangelicals, born-agains, were not allowed on the air. They weren't given the free time. They weren't part of the National Council of Churches, so they weren't allowed free time. What happened was they had to buy time. And all of a sudden,
there's a source of revenue.
In the mid-'70s, stations discovered we can make a lot more money if we put on these guys than if we give the free time, the sustaining time. So all of a sudden, they had created a monster, but the mainline churches had created it. It really is their fault, and now years later, the mainline churches are the ones complaining that stations are letting these evangelicals get on. Well, hey, it's their fault, and now what they need to do is jump on the bandwagon.
Well, even the evangelicals, the evangelical types weren't doing a very good job policing either. So a lot of these guys, people with their own denominations, weren't doing a very good job of policing these guys.
But also you have to understand from a denominational standpoint, evangelical churches are much more loosely structured than a Catholic church, or
a Presbyterian church,
Anglican or something like that.
It doesn't have a hierarchy
exactly
with any power.
You saw that in the Jimmy Swaggart
Yeah, they kicked him out of the church, and he said, oh, that's fine. It's okay with me.
It's basically, if you're going to kick me out, I quit.
Yeah, it didn't seem to make any difference.
It doesn't make any difference. He keeps carrying on the same way.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Very good question.
Okay, Jan, thanks a lot for your program, and Stephen, thanks for your knowledge.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed listening.
You bet. Bye-bye. Can you spend a little more time with us here?
All the time.
Because people are really curious about this. People are really curious about this, and you sound like a fairly objective sort of fella.
I try.
A lot of the critics on these things just hate these people.
The ministries, yeah. And I don't hate. I try to be encouraging too.
But I think you're one of the most objective reporters I've seen on the subject, and you've done your homework. Folks, if you'd like to continue this, stay right where you are. I'm Mickelson in the Morning at 284-1040 or 1-800-342-4489 as Mickelson in the Morning continues. It's 8 after 10 at 1040 WHO Radio. Mickelson here with you. Stephen Winzenburg is here in the studio with us. He's professor of radio and TV news over at Grandview, and he is an expert on televangelists. That is these guys, Bakker and Robertson and Swaggart and Falwell and Roberts and Schuler.
Can I tell you one of the things that I've done in my studies that people might be interested in? I categorize how these guys use their airtime.
Okay.
And I have found out how much time they spend asking for money.
They're really criticized as doing our commercials.
That's right. Everybody seems to think it's that bad, but it's really not. The average is about 25% fundraising. The worst tends to be Jerry Falwell and the PTL Club. Of course, PTL Club now is not called PTL anymore. It's called Heritage Ministry Today.
Is that just hanging on? Or
it's still on the air. It was on the air in Des Moines until about September 1st on Channel 17, I think, about 5:36 in the morning.
But
they took it off the air here.
Coming out of the same place, but
no,
different?
They moved studios. They're at a different location. It's not from Heritage USA.
It's not connected with at all with the
No, but they're still going with the same hosts who took over when Jim and Tammy left. And they're struggling, but they're staying on. But they spend almost half their time asking for money, 44%.
Whoa.
Falwell spends 42% of his time asking for money.
Yeah.
And then the rest of them are pretty much average or below average, even Oral Robertson. People never believe this. They always, because of the big media coverage, they think Oral Roberts spends a lot of time begging for money, but he's only spending 18% of his airtime asking for money. If you watch commercial TV, you'll spend 20 to 21% of your time watching commercials. And Oral Roberts only spends 18% asking for money. Well, he spends less time than commercial TV does. And, of course, Billy Graham is the best. Billy Graham spends 3% fundraising and about 11% in promotion of his books and his projects, but just spends almost no time fundraising whatsoever.